send us animal organs in the mail. They've dumped a deer's head and an injured snake outside our door. They've splattered hamburger on our windows. They send me pictures of myself with my eyes crossed out and sexual innuendo and all sorts of things. But I don't see it as personal. I see it as they're attacking the message, and they're attacking me for giving them the message. And that means I've touched a nerve. And so that's fine. That's fine. Now go and think about it, you know?
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. It's kind of a whirlwind at the moment here in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's also a little toasty, but we've got a lot of exciting things to report. First, next week, we'll be interrupting our regular Vegan Posse programming to bring you the long-awaited Self-Love series, a special series of episodes dedicated to expanding our tenderness, affection, curiosity, and sheer delight in one very important animal, ourselves. There will be 8 episodes in total, released daily over the course of 1 week, plus 1 day, beginning on Sunday, June 30th. The episodes will, of course, remain available for viewing on Spotify and YouTube, or if listening is your preference, you can find them all on your favorite podcast platforms. And if you love being part of the Vegan Posse, please consider subscribing on Spotify, YouTube, and or Apple. In preparation for the Self-Love series, make sure to check out my novel, Marrying Myself. Tired of all the meathead characters and predictable endings in mainstream women's fiction? Marrying Myself features a vegan protagonist, a surprise ending, and a revolutionary self-love message. It was featured on the Veg News magazine hit list, and you can find out all about it at my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com. Last but not least, I hope you can join me this year at Vegan Summerfest, where I'll be speaking on what else? Self-love, specifically self-love for vegans. In case you're not familiar with Vegan Summerfest, it's the longest running vegan conference in the US, and this year marks its 50th anniversary. There will be amazing speakers like my friend Dr. Jen Hawk and nutrition celebrity Dr. Michael Greger, and it's very family friendly, so you can even bring your kids if you have them. But honestly, for me, the best part of Vegan Summerfest is always the ridiculously delicious all-vegan food prepared by award-winning chef and previous Vegan Posse guest, Mark Reinfeld. It's from July 10th to 14th in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, so get your tickets soon. The registration link is included in the show notes. And now for today's episode, which to me really is a landmark episode. No discussion of the animal rights movement is complete without a mention of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. PETA is a group that many vegans love and others love to hate. In this episode, I had the honor of talking with PETA founder Ingrid Newkirk shortly after she celebrated her 75th birthday. Born in Surrey, England, which is why I'm sporting the Union Jack, Ingrid moved with her family to New Delhi, India when she was 7 years old. There, she assisted her mother in volunteering with Mother Teresa, helping orphans, people with leprosy, and stray animals. This experience taught her that it doesn't matter who is suffering, only whether you can help them. Ingrid went on to work in humane law enforcement, investigating animal cruelty cases. She launched PETA in 1980 at a time when researchers were experimenting on chimps in squalid labs, pigs were being slammed into walls in car crash tests, and dogs were being shot in military exercises. Since that time, PETA has won countless victories for animals, and Ingrid herself been profiled by the New Yorker, the LA Times, and Fortune, which dubbed her the Mother Teresa of rabbits. Ingrid was also the subject of HBO's award-winning documentary, I Am an Animal, and was named one of Forbes' 100 most powerful women. You can read her full bio in the show notes, and I encourage you to do so. But for me, what struck me about this conversation with Ingrid was how reassuring it was for me to be in the presence of someone who truly cares about animals. Speaking for myself, it's so easy to get caught up in our petty human concerns, and this conversation brought me back to what's really important. What's happening to animals is not okay, and it has to stop. To borrow a quote from philosopher Albert Camus, our task is impossible, so let us begin. And as you all know, it can begin with how we eat. So please enjoy this conversation with PETA founder Ingrid Newkirk. So Ingrid, welcome to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the ride of your life?
I hope so. I'm buckled in.
Good, good. So first of all, happy birthday. You recently celebrated a birthday. You look amazing, of course. And how do you feel?
I feel the same way that I've always felt, determined, passionate, hopeful to get things done, but my knees are weaker.
Right, right. That's fair. That's fair. So I heard you speak years ago at the Animal Rights Conference in Alexandria, Virginia. And I don't remember the full context, but you told a story about a seafood restaurant that was dipping live crabs in batter and deep frying them, and how you saw one crab who was dripping with batter all over him, scrambling to try to get away. And that image has stayed with me all this time. It just was so poignant to me to think of that event from the crab's perspective. You know, what must he have been thinking about what the heck was happening to him? Do you remember telling that story or even the actual event?
Yeah, I haven't thought of that in all these years, so I'm actually glad you brought it up because it reminds me now. It wasn't me who saw it. I was recounting somebody else's experience that moved me. And actually, it's quite timely because it's summer now and crabs are coming out of their little holes all over the beaches and people are going to the beaches. And so on the PETA website, PETA.org, I have a talk about crabs, who they are, what they have to put up with. And one of the things that drives me insane is that if you put crab into Google, you'll get recipes, nothing about who they are unless you really, really scroll down. And they're fascinating. They're jaw-droppingly impressive. Their eyesight, the fact they can see you coming from 60 to 80 yards away and try to escape from you because they know you're a dangerous predator. And their lives in the ocean, their lives underground, everything they do. And what breaks my heart, like that story of the little crab who was covered in batter and managed to get away from the pot and was trying to escape and would never escape, somebody picking him up and dumping him back in the pot, is the idea that all they have is that one big claw. And when people think it's funny that their dog is after the crab, even putting a crab on their kitchen floor when they're about to cook them, to let the dog have some fun with the crab just raises his arm. That's all he can do, this little being, to say, please, go away. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. And people just laugh. So a crab, a lobster scrambling to get out of the pot, being broiled alive under the grill. All these animals we don't think much about are just as important as any dog, cat, or child, or me, or you, or anybody else. They're personalities, they're individuals, they have feelings, they don't want to die, and they don't want to die badly.
Right. And in fact, that story was part of what inspired me to write a satire piece about a crawfish named Caleb, who in the story, he hears about a festival supposedly in his honor. It's a crawfish festival, and how he shows up at that festival expecting to be honored and celebrated, and then quickly realizes, oh, this is not a place I want to be. So yeah, I have used the opportunity through satire and humor when possible to just personalize these animals, because like you said, we just have these images of, the animals that are worthy of our consideration and care, and the others that are just for our enjoyment or entertainment.
That is marvelous, and it reminds me of the thing we have, which is have a turkey for dinner at Thanksgiving. And what we mean by that is invite a live turkey over and feed them a fruit and vegetable feast and save their lives, and invite friends to come over and watch them enjoying it. We also, now it's Eid, the festival of Eid, and a lot of goats are sacrificed, as they say, I think slaughtered all over the world. And yet what's really lovely, and we have a video about this on PETA India's website, is that more and more Muslims are saying you're supposed to sacrifice for Eid, and usually it's a goat, but I'm sacrificing in a different way. For example, I'm donating blood to a blood bank. I'm giving fruits and vegetables and vegan foods to the poor. I am making a charitable donation of money to something that's useful, and I'm saving a goat's life. So we have inviting goats to dinner video that's really cute on the PETA India website.
Awesome. We'll definitely link to that. So getting back to PETA, PETA, of course, stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which, of course, is an organization that just about everyone on the planet has heard of at this point. So why don't you talk a little about how you came to help found PETA?
Well, Chrissy, I grew up like most people. I wish it was all people, but most people in a family that said you have to live by the golden rule, do unto others as they would do unto you. And nobody said, do unto humans as humans would do unto you. And when I was born, there was already a dog in the family called Shawnee. And he and I were like brother and sister. We went everywhere together. We did everything. We both got car sick at the same time. I always tell the story of driving to my grandmother's. Both of us would start to feel a little and they'd have to stop the car, and we'd both get out at the same time, the dog and I. So I do think that when I grew up and I realized finally through a series of slow learning experiences that loving animals and helping others, because we also believed we loved animals, didn't just mean petting the dog or not attaching a firework to a cat's tail or beating a horse. It meant get them off your backs. They need that wool and leather and fur. It's theirs, not yours. And get them out of your mouth and your stomach. That's their flesh. They need to live, not to be some sort of cut up thing for fleeting taste. So I didn't know any of that. And I thought, gosh, the experiences I've had going into laboratories as a government inspector, going onto factory farms as a law enforcement officer, seeing a fox caught in a steel trap and knowing there was something wrong with the fur coat I loved. Back then, I gradually had these experiences, and I thought, well, if I'm able to see this, and I have been doing so badly toward animals, unknowingly, unthinkingly, I must be an example of a lot of people. So why don't I start a group, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and show people what goes on behind the scenes that they usually won't see. I mean, how many people go to a slaughterhouse? I certainly did, and I didn't need to know. But there we are. Go take pictures, take videos, emerge, show people who are kind, and say, and here, we've done the homework for you. Here are all your options. And when we started, there were very few options, but if you cared, you could make do. And today, there's no excuse. There's an option for everything that comes from stealing from animals or killing animals.
Right. Right. Did you ever think that PETA would become as massive and or as controversial as it's become?
I don't think about it really because there's so much work to do. I mean, when you say, oh, we're big, I mean, we're big compared to maybe a local humane society in a small town. But when you look at all the big corporations, the meat industry, the dairy industry, the clothing industry, the experimentation industry, the National Institute of Health, we're minuscule. And so that's why we need everybody to understand how important they are as individuals, how their voice, their everything is needed. You know, people send, maybe $10, $100 to their local humane society, and that is great. But if they then go out and spend thousands of dollars a year on leather shoes and on cosmetics that are tested in rabbits' eyes and on flesh and dairy, dairy is the worse than flesh by far because the cow gets killed in the end, or eggs, those poor chickens. And if you know a chicken, they're every bit as much an individual as anybody else.
Yes, the dairy industry was a subject that I learned about rather late in my vegan journey. It was only after I went vegan that I learned what dairy actually was and what happened. And now I, like you, believe that that's arguably the most horrific of all the animal agriculture that exists. And again, I've mentioned this point a lot, but it's morbidly hilarious how our society and our culture and the religion I was raised in, which I no longer practice, but purports to just revere motherhood, and there's nothing more sacrosanct than motherhood and that mother child bond, and yet here's this entire industry that's premised on the rupturing and complete abomination of that bond. I mean, it's mind blowing. I know I'm telling you things that you already know, but it just astounds me on a daily basis. So I can only imagine how you must feel. You're running this very large, by many measures, very successful organization, and yet there are still very few vegans. So it's like this.
Well, I
Paradox.
do believe a lot of people are vegan several days a week, or they're vegan some meals, and they don't even realize it. And what's wonderful is that now the options to be vegan are on menus. You can go to Ruth Chris Steakhouse and order a vegan platter, and they'll make it for you. I mean, Ruth Chris Steakhouse. I mean, you go to Baskin Robbins, they've got vegan ice cream flavors. So as long as we keep pushing and asking for it, demanding it, choosing it, it's good. But yes, this mother cow bond, I do think one problem is that many people are so separated from animals that are used for these purposes. They've never been to a factory farm dairy, perhaps, and they honestly think that a cow makes enough milk for her calf and for you, and that there's enough for all the milk cartons and yogurt and everything else, cheese that's in the store, as well as for the calf. They also think, and this is amazing, that a calf just produces milk, not that she has to be nursing to produce milk. So they miss the fact that the cow is artificially impregnated, otherwise known as rape. It's not a comfortable process that she goes through. She's put in a stanchion and a man sticks his arm up her backside and then injects semen into her, and she bellows. She doesn't like it. I mean, who would? And then she has a 9-month pregnancy, 10-month pregnancy, then she gives birth. And like all mothers, as you say, all mothers adore their offspring. She is so bonded. There's a hormone that's released that binds her to the child and the child to her. But within hours of birth, we yank that calf away, throw him in a wheelbarrow, drag him off by his legs. She cries and she tries to follow him. And then he ends up as veal because we want all the milk that we have impregnated her to produce. So she grieves and she is miserable, and she never recovers. A mother never recovers from losing her child, and she is used year after year until she's dry or near dry, in which case she becomes hamburger, cheap hot dog meat, cheap stew meat, cheap pot pie meat. And so I say, no one can say, I'm a vegetarian and still have dairy, because that cow is going to be killed after a miserable life, much worse even than the meat cow, the beef cow, and so on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you're very on point in that people don't realize what's happening. I had a close friend who said to me once, she said, "Yeah, I know the dairy cows don't have a great life, but I kind of see it as having a crummy job. I've got a crummy job that I'm not crazy about, and so do they." And I won't name her name, but I said, it's not just a crummy job. They're getting nothing out of this.
Well, it's back to put yourself, do unto others, is say, okay, imagine yourself as her, and here you're going to be raped, and you're going to give birth, and you're going to have your child taken away, and in the end you're going to be kicked and prodded down the same slaughter ramp to your frightening, fearful, probably painful death. Is that like having a crummy job? I don't think so. No, not at all. But Philip Glass said something I adore. Is someone once said to him, because of course the outside of the cow becomes shoes and belts and bags and so on. Someone once said to him, it's really hard to find vegan shoes. And I think about this with people saying it's really hard to find good vegan cheese. Not that it is anymore, because it's there. But he said to them, it might be hard, but think how much harder it is for the cow when you don't try. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yes, yes. It's like what we consider hard, these minor inconveniences compared to their life, their physical safety and comfort and torture. Yes. So getting back to you and your personal story, did you realize when you founded PETA that you were essentially committing your life to animals, devoting your life to this cause?
No, I don't think I thought about that either, but I would have been delighted to realize it, because I found something that matters very much to me, always has, and I'm able to do it every day, 7 days a week. So I am so happy to have a fulfilling life in which I can see progress and try to encourage others to join, whether with PETA or not with PETA, who cares, but to do things that will make a difference, at least won't hurt animals. They'll stop hurting animals indirectly or unconsciously or unthinkingly. And so I'm delighted.
And how has the journey been for you? How has working in this cause affected your personal relationships and just your personal life in general?
Well, it's depressing. I mean, how can it not be? Your heart breaks into a million pieces every day. It's very hard to look at the videos. I probably cry more now than I've ever cried, and I always used to cry over animal cruelty. But what's the point of that? You have to turn that sorrow, possibly that anger, into action. If you sit home and cry, nothing's going to change. But if you get on with it, you can see that things do change. And I go to the grocery store and I see people I don't know buying oat milk and soy milk and almond milk and macadamia nut milk and rice milk. And I think, good grief, when we started, there was none of this. It was mix some powder with some water and make something that tasted almost like something you remember as milk. I mean, fabulous changes. And that all comes from effort, from doing, from using your voice. And I say to everybody, please don't underestimate yourself. You are powerful. You're a human being. You've got great privileges of being able to say and do and influence others and lead by example.
Yes, as you're certainly doing. Did you anticipate becoming the subject of so much controversy, both within the animal rights movement and outside of it?
I don't think I thought about that either. And, it's water off a duck's back. one of the few expressions you can actually use about harmful animals. Because I know that what's happening is I'm making people defensive. And by saying something that they feel that they're perhaps guilty about, maybe, or they're not quite sure of, and that promotes discussion and thought. So it's all part of a massaging process where there'll be rejection and sometimes hostile rejection. People send us animal organs in the mail. They've dumped a deer's head and an injured snake outside our door. They've splattered hamburger on our windows. They send me pictures of myself with my eyes crossed out and sexual innuendo and all sorts of things. But I don't see it as personal. I see it as they're attacking the message, and they're attacking me for giving them the message. And that means I've touched a nerve. And so that's fine. That's fine. Now go and think about it, you know?
Have you always had such a thick skin and just able to compartmentalize these painful incidents?
I think you have to develop it, because I know some people are very upset. They're afraid to say something. During the fur wars, and luckily fur is pretty much gone now, almost entirely gone now. Young people don't want it. That people would say, well, don't dare say anything to someone who's wearing a fur. And I would say, but what are they going to do to you? They're not going to hang you upside down and tear out your fingernails. You're not going to go to jail for it. It's a free country with free speech. You have a voice. Say something. You can say something very, very nice. You know, you can say, oh, in my case, it's true. I used to have a fur, but then I learned and describe how the animals are killed and say, so I can't do it anymore. And if they spit in your eye, if they say, get lost, and other things that are far nastier, it's just words. They're not going to do anything to you. And believe me, when they go home, I would tell people, they will run that tape. Now, thought I looked really great, and then someone came up to me and said this, and now I just feel funny about wearing it, and I wonder how many other people are thinking it. You know, don't look back on your life and think, I squandered my voice. I squandered my opinions. I wasn't true to myself. Be the kind person you are, openly, forthrightly, fearlessly. Ain't nothing gonna happen to you.
And was that a way of living that came to you naturally, or did you evolve over time?
Oh, I had to force myself to do the same thing. I mean, I don't think very many of us wish to stick our heads above the parapet. We'd rather go along. But looking at what happens to animals and knowing they can't revolt for themselves, they can't hold their own revolution, they can't even say something that we'll understand, although they certainly have voices that we don't listen to. I thought, gosh, I mean, I have to do something, don't I? And so I remember the very first time taking over a microphone at a fur show, and my knees were knocking and my teeth were chattering, and I thought, but it was over and I'd done it. And I thought, good, you gave a lesson, you gave some facts to people. They'll take it or leave it. If one person decides to change as a result of that, bravo.
And how do you feel the animal rights movement is doing these days?
Well, it's growing. It's growing and growing. I mean, you hear all this mud slung at it as usual. You hear all these meat industry people saying, oh, well, you know, vegan food is so highly processed, it's detrimental to your health. And you think, that's pretty desperate. I mean, there's nothing more processed than, say, cheese, which goes through a digestive tract that's been infiltrated with chemicals. And I mean, it's just ludicrous. They come up with these things, but each thing they come up with, each rock that's thrown at you, is because people are afraid. The world is changing. You look around and you will see everyone says, oh, my sister's vegan. Oh, my daughter's vegan. Oh, I try to be vegan. It's just wonderful that things are going forward, and we must never be discouraged by the rubbish that the opposing forces try to use to put us down. We must be very strong and make fun of them, as you said with your parody. Something just came out in the press yesterday saying that men are eating much, much more meat. They're more likely to eat meat. They do eat more meat than women. And I thought we've got to immediately come up with an ad that just calls them meatheads.
Yes, let's do it. So what are some of the accomplishments that you're proudest of in your long history of activism?
I don't know about proud, but pleased. I think there are significant things. People often said to us, "Why do you go after the circus?" The use of elephants, for example, in the circus, because in the scheme of things, there aren't that many when you compare them, say, to the number of animals in labs, which is hideous, or factory farms, which is hideous, and so on. And I always thought it's very, very important because children go to the circus. And the thing they should not get into their heads is that humans have the right to dominate animals, to make them do silly tricks and wear costumes, stand on their heads, live in chains and in cages. That must not be what children see, because that sets them up to accept. So we've campaigned vigorously. And of course, the biggest circus in the world was Ringlings. They've come back recently, but it's okay. They've come back without any animal acts. And they never thought that they would abandon animal acts. But we were at every show of Ringlings for decades. And we exposed them for cruelty, the death of lions, the death of elephant babies, and eventually they had to give up. And now children can go to the circus and they're not given that wretched lesson that animals are ours for the taking, because we believe animals are not ours.
Right. And that was fairly recently.
It was
Right?
a few years ago, and now we've just got Universe Soul to get rid of animals and many other circuses that are not as well known. And there are almost no animals left in circuses. And so we
That's
just have to
amazing.
work on
Yeah.
it.
Because I remember just a few years ago going to a protest, a Ringling Brothers protest here in Nashville.
Yeah.
It must have been after that point. That's
All
good.
gone, all
That's
gone. And now we
very
have virtual reality. I mean, if you really want to get up close to an animal without harming a hair on their head, you can even go underwater with animals in virtual reality. And of course, you're not interfering with them at all. And it's really fantastic.
amazing. Amazing. Well, I've got just a couple more questions for you since I know you've got a lot of good work to do today. But one of the questions I like to ask all of my guests, is there a single word that for you sums up what being vegan is all about?
Kindness.
Yes, that about sums it up. And I can tell just hearing you talk about everything that you've done and everything that you've accomplished that, like you said, you're pleased, but not necessarily proud, which is an interesting distinction to me. And at the same time, I get it, because to me, treating treating animals with baseline kindness and respect, it's a pretty low moral baseline. It's not
Yeah.
really something to congratulate ourselves tremendously for. It's pretty.
Yeah, I think if there were other words, I mean, I'm only allowed one, but if there were other words, it would be respect and understanding and non-violence and just decency and
Just
understanding, all these things.
yeah.
That how can you say no to being a vegan? It's an ethical way of living and behaving.
Right, right. And it's a wonderful way of living and behaving. I love it. And I feel so lucky to have found this path. Um, so what's next for you in this next chapter?
It's pretty much same old, because of course in cruelty to animals world, there are so many ways in which animals are disregarded and mistreated and slaughtered. We're very vigorous on the clothing campaign now, and people understand fur. They're beginning to understand leather, and a lot of fashion shows in Europe particularly and in Scandinavia are no longer allowing leather. Many are no longer allowing so-called exotic, I hate that word, but exotic skins, meaning these poor crocodiles and snakes and so on that are raised in these filth pits. But we're saying, look, we're not survivalists. Let's get all animals off our backs and feet and belts and so on. They're wool. And we've been in every continent in shearing sheds and seen these gentle beings being smashed in the face with clippers and terrible, terrible things. Shearing is an atrocity. So we're saying no feathers. We've been to ostrich farms in South Africa, and you'd have to have a strong stomach to see how they get the feathers. So no feathers, no wool, no leather, no Angora. Been to rabbit farms in China where the Angora comes from. Just get over it. If there's an animal in clothing, say no.
All right. Well, thank you. That's a great place to leave it. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all the amazing work that you've done for all animals, human and non-human alike. And we close every episode of the Vegan Posse by taking 30 seconds of silence for all of the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So Ingrid, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Ingrid Newkirk, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.
And stay vegan. Thank you,
Yes.
Chrissy. Bye.
Bye.